welcome to the third knowledge series from Samvit Insights, Data Science and Predictive Analytics for Collection Scorecard. At the outset, let me introduce the speaker of today, Mr. Rupam Upadhyay. He has more than 18 years of experience in data science, predictive analytics, and business consulting. And IIT alumnus, Mumbai, Rupam has worked across various geographies in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa, across multiple verticals of sales, risk management, and business operations. Rupam is also author of a very popular data science blog called UC Analytics, focused on data science and machine learning. I would also like to introduce Samvit Insights, a 10-year-old management consulting and corporate training firm focused on banking and financial services, which covers business strategy, risk management, design, implementation. If you have time, I would request you to log in to www.samvitinsights.com and get a sense of our offerings, the kind of clients we have, and the kind we work with that. With that, I will hand over the mic to Rupam to take you through the webinar on Collection Scorecard.
Thanks, Arijit. So just to begin with, let me just quickly run you through the flow of the presentation. So what I'm going to start with is the just life cycle of a borrower rather, and we'll look at how analytics come in and play a role in terms of enriching overall decision making at each stage of this life cycle. Then I'm going to focus on the collection scorecard, which is the focus of this workshop, how it fits in the life cycle of the borrower. And then comes the more detailed part of how the collection scorecards are built, what kind of data is required to build these scorecards, how machine learning and data science come into picture and kind of give us a good understanding of what's going to happen to the borrower. And eventually I'm going to present a case study, something that I've worked on, the kind of results that we got, how we actually build this model and how it got integrated in the business process. So this is in a nutshell the agenda of the today's session. And after that, we'll have a Q&A and a more open discussion. As I was telling you, life cycle of a borrower. I'm not going to spend too much time on this part because I'm guessing that most of you are already aware of this. I'm going to spend more time on the technical part of collection scoring and how collection scoring is done. But it's a good idea to just have a look at it and how it fits into the entire or holistic picture of a lending organization, banks, NBFC, or fintechs. So quickly, this is a life cycle of the borrower. First, you get a borrower, then there's a marketing effort. The target market is approached, and then there's application scoring, which is underwriting essentially. Then the borrower could either turn out to be a good borrower, which is like they make their repayment on time, and that's when more marketing or sales opportunities are generated. The second part, which is what we are going to focus on, is the collection recovery, which is where the borrowers don't pay their dues on time. And this is what the reason why we are really concerned about this area, or it's a area of higher interest, is because post moratorium, which is something that we will see in another month, there is an expectation that collection and recovery will become a major focus for all the financial institutions. Something that I assume that most of you are already aware of, which is application scoring. Application scoring is essentially happens at the time of underwriting, where you have a internal, so bank or NBFC or fintech have their internal score. This is beyond just the CIBIL score, where they look at all the different facets of the applicant, and basis that they take a call whether to apply or whether to approve this loan or not. Collection scoring kicks into picture post disbursal. So once the disbursement has already happened, borrower is in your system, that's when collection scoring fits into the system. And what it does is it kind of looks ahead in time and say that what is the likelihood or what is the probability of borrower to become a NPA in the next, say, 3 months or 6 months period. And it also suggests, like basis a scientific principle, what kind of actions are required to keep the borrower straight and maximize the overall recovery and reduce the overall delinquency. So just to kind of create a similarity or dissimilarity, what is the difference between, say, application scorecard and collection scorecard? Let's just quickly have a look at this picture. Now what's happening is that application scorecard or credit scorecard, as I was talking about, is something that is used at the time of underwriting. So you look at the data on that day from different sources, and it includes application, it includes CIBIL track record, it includes bureau track record, it includes various other sources that you are using for data. These days, fintechs are using like quite a novel sources as well, and which we are going to talk about, which I'm going to talk about a little later. Credit scorecard in that sense is static picture, as you're seeing over here. So it's a picture where you are on that day, what the borrower looks like and what is its surrounding. So you're kind of estimating, okay, there's a risk, possibly a storm building up in the background, but at like so far things are looking good. There's a high likelihood that the borrower is going to make all the payments. Everything looks fine. So let's just disperse the money. Collection scorecard, how it is different from credit scorecard, it's kind of like a motion picture. It's like movies, as you're seeing over here. And what you're seeing is that movies provide, or the dynamic data provides information which is much more and much beyond what you see in a static picture. So you could see like, okay, at one point this person is in a strong footing when things are stable, and then things started declining. And it's all happening over a period of time. So that's in a nutshell what's the difference between collection scorecard and credit scorecard. Collection scorecard is something where you look at data over a period of time. And of course, the challenges that come in terms of analyzing dynamic data are much beyond than what you see in a static data. So in terms of overall algorithmic pattern, as in terms of using of machine learning, collection scorecards are fairly more advanced than the credit scorecard, as I would put you. Another aspect is that like off late, like alternate data is coming for credit scoring. And even there, like because the data volume is so high and there are behavioral patterns in that data. So even in that case, you use similar kind of ideas as is used in collection scoring. And that's where credit scoring is also becoming fairly advanced in some sense. So just to move further, why are we talking about collection scorecard now, and why is it important? Now, some of the things that we did is we just like had a word with industry experts and leaders, and what sort of things to expect post moratorium. So moratorium is something that like from 1st of September, we are expecting the moratorium to go away, and then the various new different restructuring and other things will come into picture. But what to expect post moratorium, what we used to see for all these years, like the kind of bounce rates, kind of loss rates, when we spoke to these industry experts, and like this is the kind of consensus that is emerging. And these numbers may look little higher, but you never know like on which side the things are going to go. But this is like an estimate where post moratorium it is expected that the bounce rate is going to go up like by anything like 1.5 to 2x than what the business as usual used to be. Similarly, loss rate is another thing that is going to go up fairly high. Only time will tell how high that will be, but there's a general consensus that whatever we had seen in the past, COVID is nothing like that, and it's going to increase the risk. And when we are expecting such a say exponential increase in all the numbers that we see, the expectation is that there has to be a scientific way to tackle this problem and kind of bring the numbers back in your favor, where you are much more aware of what's going to happen. And just the awareness itself, like, I mean, I'm going to talk in the case study as well, that just the awareness and just the knowledge that, okay, this is what is going to happen, the kind of actions banks and NBFC take significantly improve the overall chances of reducing delinquency and increasing recoveries. So that's where collection scoring comes into picture, where what it does is that it's a scientific way of creating early warnings. So this is what is going to happen in future, though the borrower is looking, everything is looking good, as was the case in that motion picture. But there is a chance that there is going to be a decline in the performance of this borrower. Or so it happens at an individual borrower level. It's not a collective portfolio thing, but you can always roll it up to collective portfolio. Second thing is that there are so many benefits. So optimization of the overall how you allocate the cases to your agents, then collection agents, how to maximize overall recovery. So there are all like positive sides of collection scorecard, and that you will also see when we will actually discuss the case study and the whole process of development of collection scorecard, which is what my focus is in the today's talk. So now comes the actual part, like the part which we want to focus a little bit more time during this webinar, which is what is post disbursement risk and how collection scorecard kind of plays a important role in understanding or learning from so much data which is coming from various places. So the idea with collection scorecard, as you could also see, is you kind of track people's behavior, and you see, okay, this is what is happening, and you see what is the recent behavior, how things are changing, and basis this you make the future prediction. And this has worked significantly. This whole idea has worked really well in virtually every field of science, so be it physics, be it behavioral sciences. And same idea is what we use in banks to understand what's going to happen to a customer as they will go forward, and what sort of delinquencies or what kind of default rates or NPAs to expect from them. So how do you actually build it? What is the, say, mathematical principle behind building a collection scorecard? So this is what I'm going to discuss in this slide, where what you're seeing is that overall, if you look at the overall repayment behavior of any customer, essentially it can be divided, and this is a simplistic picture of course, but you can divide it into these 4, say, steps. So it's kind of like, okay, like, I mean, you're going to hop through these steps while you're going to get to the final stage of your whether a repayment or like whether you are going to like pay the loan on time and close the loan, or whether there's something else is going to happen. So it's kind of like a game in a way, and there is a probabilities associated with each step. So let me just quickly describe what all steps do we have. We have a regular, some customer who is going to make a repayment on time and going to stay regular. So somebody like, I mean, if the EMI is due before the due date, like the customer before or on the due date, the customer is making a payment. So then that way the customer is regular. Low delinquency bucket, typically in say analytical sense of view, is defined as anything between 15 plus DPD to 60 DPD or even XDPD in certain cases. Then high DPD is of course like, I mean, 90 plus DPD, or where the risk has gone up. And all these like definitions are derived based on portfolio. So you analyze the data and where you see what kind of probabilities you are seeing, and then you define these buckets. And finally is of course write-off. And what's happening is that these are the hopping probabilities. So say regular, if some customer is a regular, what is the probability that in next month that customer is going to become delinquent? So that's the probability that we are talking about, probability of moving from regular to low bucket. Then second probability is from low bucket, lower DPD bucket, to say higher DPD bucket. And this time frame of, again, you can define like anything between say next quarter or next 2 quarters. What is the likelihood that a low delinquency bucket customer will become a high DPD customer? And then again, write-off is another thing. And it's not just a forward movement. Like, I mean, there's going to be a rollback as well. So rollback probabilities are also defined. Now this entire process, if you kind of fit it in terms of a mathematical formula, it follows a Markov chain. Now, this is some concept in mathematics where things change their state. So it's not life is not a static process, but it's a dynamic process, and there are changes in state. So those same concepts we use for collection scoring as well. And it's applicable for virtually every portfolio. So like, I mean, you can think of a secured portfolio, you can think of unsecured portfolio. Some of the examples which I'll continue with will be unsecured loans, which is PL salary and SENP business loans that we'll look at. But this is not restrictive to just secured or unsecured. It can be used across credit card, line of credit, and everywhere. So now the question is, how do you actually build a Markov chain for an individual customer? So that's where it is coming down to, because as I mentioned in the beginning, collection scoring works at a n of 1. So n of 1 means sample of 1, which is one individual customer. Now the way the method or the idea behind building this n of 1 is that you have your you build these lookalike models. So lookalike models is like there are similarities between behavior of people, and from that you try to derive what sort of patterns are followed by people who kind of jump into higher delinquency bucket. So there is a pattern, and that data actually captures this really well. I mean, I've seen it time and again, all time, every time I work, and irrespective of geographies. As Arijit was telling you, like I've worked in China, India, United States, and same kind of patterns, like some of the patterns you see all across. Certain novel patterns always emerge in based on geography, but it's a very interesting thing that there is always steps that people take before they kind of jump into a higher delinquency bucket, and that's essentially what we are trying to model, or what we are trying to find using collection scorecard. So these lookalike models is the basic idea, and I'm going to deliberate more on these lookalike model and how you create these homogeneous segments within your portfolio. So your portfolio could be a, say, a SENP business portfolio or a PL salary portfolio. That there can be multiple features within that portfolio. So personal loan can have income, profile of a company that the borrower works with, experience of the borrower, and you can just keep adding to it. And these are all static behavior, but in addition to this, there is a dynamic behavior, which is where the magic happens. So dynamic behavior is where what sort of repayment track record the customer is managing with your bank, your NBFC, or your fintech versus say your competitors and all the other players in the market. Yes. And in addition to that, there are so many different behavioral patterns that are coming in from various sources of data, which can all be incorporated. And each time you increase the information to your model, each time you make your increase the information in your data, the level of granularity or your understanding of the customer goes up. So that's where these statistical models are developed, where you have got all these patterns that are available in the data. So let me just move forward and show you what, when I say data, what do I mean, and where are these, what are the different sources of data that you use for collection scoring. And there are, say, a place to start. That's what, and I'm going to talk about that as well later part of my presentation. Where to start? Where does a say a bank or an NBFC that is just starting their journey in terms of collection scoring or even analytics, where do they start? And the second question is, when you start, what is there out there to keep exploring? So both these questions I'll try to answer. In terms of data sources, think of data as something that is telling you about your customer in various ways. So there is static data, which is nothing but say demographic profile. So somebody's, where do they work? It stays static for a fairly long period of time. What is their date of birth? That's a static number. Salary also doesn't change so fast. But the dynamicity of data comes in when you look at their transactions. So transactions is something that can change every second. Every minute the transactions can change. In terms of repayment track record, it's a monthly or it can be weekly based on how you're doing your collection. Then the data is also coming from other sources, channels where data is updating or changing every few seconds. So say social media data or mobile data reading. That's another aspect which is emerging of late. So you can essentially classify your data into like something which is static, something which is dynamic but changes slowly, and something which is dynamic but changes really fast. And each source will enrich your understanding about the customer, similar to a video. of a customer every time you run your model. So that's essentially what is. Product holding is another thing. Now, if you kind of divide it in this, if you look at this data, some of you will say, okay, like I'm part of an NBFC. Maybe I don't have data related to say what is happening on their savings account or current account. But still you have a lot of data about their repayment track record, about what's happening to the customer, which I've seen to be like one of the key information sources that itself on its own can produce a collection scorecard that is at the efficiency level of say 50 to 60%. Demographic data, you are again like sitting you've got fairly good demographic data available in virtually every financial institution, and that also plays a significant role. Other data sources is something which I say is an evolution process, where you keep exploring what is out there, how to bring those data source in, and each time you bring something in, like your understanding goes up. It's like knowledge. You know more about your customer, and your understanding about the customer is going up. So you keep exploring more sources, bring in more data, learn more from those sources, and constantly improve. That's essentially how I see the overall data science process as it works in some of the leading banks that I've worked with. Like, like you call it American Express. Like I've seen how, so I got the chance to work with them, and like how the overall process was designed. And it's not that like, okay, on day one, you're perfect, but it's constantly, and even the leading organization thrive for that. Like, okay, like they know that, like, it's not a complete thing. Like we have learned it all. Constantly keep looking for new data sources, constantly keep updating your knowledge about your customer. So that's a constant thing which I see in organizations that are doing analytics really well. And they started early. So they didn't say, okay, like, when we have this much data, only then we'll start. So you start, and that's when all the interesting things happen. So just to move further, again, let's slightly deeper into the same idea. What data are we talking about? So I'll give you a few examples. So repayment track record, as you're seeing over here, is like you have got the overall velocity of check bounce. So velocity, what is velocity? So velocity is term that you use possibly in terms of like speed, or like, how things are moving. And this is a term that you'll see coming in a lot in behavioral scorecards and collection scorecard, because you try to see, okay, what is the overall velocity in terms of customer is moving, and velocity tells you, okay, but what the next move is going to be. Similarly, promise to pay, this is another information, or repayment on its own. So regularly, whether like, even 1 day delay in terms of somebody's track record 3 months ago can tell you a lot what's going to happen in future. So all those small patterns is what you try to notice and try to build your intelligence around. Asset like collateral type, if it's a secured loan, then you have all this information. Third-party data is something which is a very exciting field, which is opening up. Honestly speaking, I'm doing it for 18 years, worked with banks, not just in India, but across the globe. And this is a third-party data phenomena, which is happening across the globe. And India is actually, like, we are doing quite well in terms of how we are utilizing third-party data, or how we are looking at it, and how we are kind of moving towards it. So working with few fintechs, again, like across the globe, like I've seen that, like, there is this need that fintechs are kind of bringing onto the table and kind of showing the way, okay, like there's so much data. And just having data is not good enough, because you have to create intelligence, and that's where data science comes into picture. Demographic, again, you have got a lot of data available already in your organization. Loan related data, again, you have a lot of it already there. Transactions, possibly bank and specific to if you have access to this. But there are ways, even say fintechs are kind of building transactions data like that I'm seeing, or NBFC, some of the leading NBFC, how they're building a lot of information around transactions. This is another very exciting area. So it doesn't need to be just a bank, but there are various sources and avenues to generate this. Mobile data, as I was talking about, like that's another place where things are happening every second. So your mobile things are happening every second, and if the customer is giving you access to their information, you could see what all things that information is kind of pointing towards. And so overall, I see that one area which is like gets a lot of attention of late is the third party data. Okay, what's out there? We are collecting our data. We might have to put our house in order, but that's the place to start. That's the place to start with collection scorecard. And over a period of time, also looking at third party or other data sources. So that's another area which I kind of enjoy working a lot. It's a very exciting area, honestly. Like, I mean, as I was telling you, last 3 or 4 years, the kind of excitement that is there in this space, the kind of information that is there for all of us to use is phenomenal. So just to give you a few examples, again, like won't get too deeper into it. Credit bureau is something that is always available. But credit bureau, typically people tend to work with just credit CIBIL reports or the different credit bureau reports at the time of underwriting. So that's a static image. What is also available is something called bureau scrub. So you can speak to your bureau that you are working with, and they will be able to provide. And these days, like all 4 bureaus are out there, so this data is fairly fast to access. Like within a few weeks or within a week or 2 weeks, you will have this data once you create the request. And it's also not very expensive. Like that's the best part, which is like its cost is also a factor, because there's competition, so much competition within credit bureau. You can get this data at a very almost nominal charges per customer. So say like what will you do? How will you do this credit bureau rates? This thing is called bureau scrub or credit bureau scrub. So say you have 100,000 customers on your portfolio. You just tell the bureau, okay, why don't you just give me a bureau scrub for this entire portfolio of 100,000 customers. You share their information. This is already something that there must be a pipeline between your organization and the bank and the bureau. And the bureau will revert with this data really fast. So they'll say, okay, you know what, like these are the 100,000 customers. This is what they have done in the last 3 years. You can ask for more data as well. In the last 3 years, what their patterns are, what is their transactions, what kind of things are happening with them, not just with you, but across the financial institutions. So that's one source, very important source, easy to access, easily available for everybody. Utility payment is something which of late, like there's a lot of emphasis on this, and soon you will see, like, I mean, already, I mean, I don't know if you've seen, like before we went into lockdown, there was this talk about accounts, like, I mean, so something like accounts aggregator. So essentially what they do is they collect information from all the different, not just the liability or not just the asset information, but everything. So already I think like some of the leading, like SBI, GFC, I think they're already part of this thing where like all these different players will come and you will get access to what is the bill payments that is happening. In March, it has already gone live. Because of the lockdown, it didn't get so much attention. But yeah, this is another area which is opening up significantly. Online shopping payments, again, exciting area to explore, including the social media. So these are the areas which like you have to have a kind of investment. So it's not like, I mean, from day one you will be able to use, but this is what organizations do. They start with something and they constantly evolve. So I call this an evolutionary journey rather than say, okay, I'm going to make all my decision on social media. That's not going to be a very good strategy, honestly. But it's as an evolutionary strategy, as a say delta in your model in terms of performance. These sources are going to play a crucial role. From the supply chain point of view, there's an anchors transaction, there's data coming in from various different sources. So that's another area of a lot of excitement, but possibly specific to one area. And this is just a quick example. The sources are growing exponentially. And that's how I see things in the market. working every day with these alternate data sources plus what is available in the bank. Very exciting times, honestly. And if you want to have a career in machine learning, this is the time. So coming to the case study, what I'm going to show you is one of the case study that I've applied, and something that will give you ideas in terms of how to use it for your own purpose, and how it was applied in this particular financial institution, what sort of factors were used, what kind of information was gathered, and how you put it all together. So what you're seeing over here is a collective information about the model that was built, the collection scorecard. And I'm going to slowly kind of run you through it. This is something that you want to kind of focus your attention on. Now, what was the objective of this model? So the financial institution was observing a high roll forward rate. So roll forward as in, like I was talking about that state change, if you remember from the Markov change. So delinquency, which is like, say, if you're in the 30 plus DPD bucket, or say like 0 to 30 bucket, what are your chances that you will move to 30 plus DPD? So that's the roll forward that is happening. And typically, like, I mean, because these are signals which are very, say, like, I mean, something that you look at, but the idea is to cut down on this roll forward rate. And what was the strategy that was used to reduce the roll forward rate? And some of the insights I'm going to talk about that as well. Were just looking at data, you can learn so much about the organization. That's like one of the good thing which I discovered. This was slightly like few years ago, and like I never went on the field. You don't need to go out there, and like just like if you are a partial, impartial, say, observer, you'll be able to learn so much about the organization, something that they are missing out on. So I'll run through those insights as well. So in terms of what was used, so I'm going to briefly talk about machine learning, but probably in the next slide, and what exactly machine learning means and how it is different from the traditional model. So I'll keep that for later. But just to give you a quick sense what the model was and what the model results were, first of all, you kind of get information about all these historic data that is already available in the organization. So historic information such as, like, first is demographic, that's easy to find. CIBIL score also, like something that most organizations have it available for use. So then the second part was the repayment track record. So that's where like things are changing on a regular basis, and that's where the behavioral patterns are emerging. And typically, I'll tell you like one thing, that behavioral or the collection scorecards usually perform better than the credit scorecard. And that performance is something that is measured over here, and I'll talk about this also. But the reason why they perform really better than, or much better than, the application scorecard or the credit scorecard is because of this behavioral data that is available. So lots of information is kind of hiding in here, ready to be used, but how to use it is, that's where machine learning comes into the picture. So repayment track record, check bounces, PTPs, broken promise, loan information, product related information, third party data. For this particular project, CIBIL or the bureau data was, so bureau scrub that I was talking about was used. So most of this information to a larger extent is available in virtually every organization. Sometimes the quality could be up and down, and usually I've seen that quality, like usually people think that it's not good, and once you actually analyze, there is a lot of information just hiding in there. And using this information, the question is, could I predict what is the likelihood or what is the probability of a customer to move to a higher delinquency bucket in the next 6 months? So how do you do that? So this particular thing is going to be a probability figure. So probability, I mean, just quick introduction, is something between 0 and 1. And if you are aware, like, I mean, coin toss, like that's famous example, is probability of heads and tails is 50%. So if you toss a coin, 50% chances that when you do a roll forward probability, sometimes it will be like for your entire portfolio could be say 10%, 12%, 15%, 30%, whatever that number is. But what you're trying to do is that broad portfolio number, you're trying to break it down to an individual customer. So let's say myself, if I am in a say X bucket at this point, you're saying what is the probability of Rupam to jump to NPA or become NPA, become 90 plus DPD in the next 6 months. And say one customer will get a probability of say 2%, and Rupam got a probability of 80%. So you already see, okay, like there are these numbers. What to do with 80%, what to do with 2% is also a scientific endeavor. What kind of actions to take for 80%, and that's also something that I'll discover. And once you build this model, you evaluate the model's performance. Now, this is the graph which I'm going to talk about. And some terms, maybe you have heard about it, like these are fairly commonly used word in banking and if people work with data. This is Gini index. So what Gini means is that how good your model is than just tossing a coin. So I'll tell you what tossing a coin means. If a customer walks in, or you randomly pick a customer from the portfolio and you toss a coin. And when you toss a coin, you will say that, like, I mean, this customer is going to roll forward. Another customer, again, you toss a coin, this customer is not going to roll forward. In that case, your overall knowledge about the customer is absolutely zero. It's a completely random experiment. And that way, your Gini is going to be zero, which is represented by this red line over here. Now, the second question is, you of course want to beat that. I mean, like just tossing a coin, if that's what the whole thing is, we can all have we can just keep tossing coin and keep predicting, but that's not going to help anybody at all. The model has to need to perform significantly better than just tossing a coin. And not just tossing a coin, it has to significantly improve the performance than what the current practices within the bank is. So if you typically see, and I've done this analysis like as a hobby project across few of the banks, and what you will see is that typically, be it for credit underwriting slightly Gini you will get higher for the expert. Collection, it is slightly lower. But overall, what you will see is that even with the completely human system where banks are taking a call, some customers are becoming NPA, another are not. They typically operate in the range of say 60, say not even 60, I would say like more like 50 to 52, 50 to 52%. That range, that is the Gini which you get. Like if you look at a typical system, completely operated in a manual way, intelligent credit underwriter, intelligent people, but the overall noise in the system itself is so much that that's the region when people operate in. Model has to significantly better that, and that's what this model was able to do. So 71, 73, when you're looking at it, these numbers, train and test, essentially what it is telling you is you have beaten the random tossing of coins. You have also beaten what was happening in the current situation within the organization by a huge margin. So that's essentially what Gini tells you. Gini tells you how good you are in terms of making a prediction whether customer is going to become delinquent or not in 6 months. Moving forward, how do you do that? So how do you build this model? So it's all very good that you got all the data in place, you got all the questions in right place. How are these different variables that will come into picture and create your model? So what you're seeing over here is the first model, the model which is often used in credit scoring. So all the underwriting credit scorecard that are built not just in India, across the globe, are primarily built on logistic regression, which is this statistical method, fairly powerful. it considers that everything as a linear relationship. And what you're seeing this is the probability that I was talking about. So probability of customer becoming NPA, this is the P part. And what do you have over here? These X's are nothing but the age of a customer, income of a customer, and various other factors. So these X's are kind of telling you what is the probability. So if the customer age is 20 to 30, what is the probability of that them customer to become NPA? 30 to 50, just as an example. And these beta terms are nothing but the weightage that is given to each of those variables. So again, that's just to give you an idea. These are different categories of variables that you have in the model. And when you do your analysis, this is the formula which you kind of operate on. Logistic regression is great. It has worked really well. Still, like for credit scoring, it's one of the go-to method. However, when you think of collection scorecard, things become slightly more murky. As I was telling you, credit scorecard is a static image. You look at a photo, like you kind of look at it, like, I mean, you think even in terms of your own brain. When you look at a photo, what kind of information you get and what kind of effort do you put in? And when you look at a video, what kind of effort or what kind of information you're getting. So machine learning algorithms, like, so neural network is one of them, which is really powerful, deep neural network. So whatever you're seeing in Google these days, so when you talk to your Google and it kind of understands what you're trying to say, Alexa and all these other things, or when you do a Google search, it throws in the right kind of images at you. It can identify what's a dog, what's a cat. So that's all happening at a neural network level. And these are really powerful models. And deep neural networks where you kind of add more information, it's even more powerful. So whatever artificial intelligence that you're thinking about, whatever you see these days, whatever is being discussed in the media, popular culture, it's all neural network and nothing else. But apart from that, there are other machine learning algorithms equally powerful, which is boosting algorithms like XGBoost and various other things. And these algorithms are tailor-made for the work that needs to be done for collection scoring. Why? Because data is extremely complicated. Data is non-linear. When you look at what kind of data that is coming in, you kind of say, okay, like, I mean, it's non-linear because there are so many different patterns that are there. Also, the kind of genie. So at the end of the day, test of the pudding, or rather the is in the taste, as they say. That's what your Gini score is. That's what your Gini score is. And you kind of beat these traditional logistic regression hands down using machine learning, especially when you talk about behavioral data. So that's one of the key things that is there. Moving forward, how do you build it? And this is a typical process of building a collection scorecard. It starts with data diagnostic, where you go in the company, you kind of like look at your own data, and usually it's sitting in silos. And that's a typical process all across. And that should not be a hindrance process, because data is there, but it's sitting somewhere else. You kind of need to bring it together. It takes a month or couple of weeks of time, but it's an important activity for building a good model. Then comes the data engineering part, which is essentially now you've got all the raw data sitting with you. How to clean it, how to prepare it for your machine learning model, what kind of intelligence you want to derive. So there is a fair bit of work that goes in here. Finally, the modeling part, which is the cool part, which is what is often shown as a interesting thing, where like you use machine learning model to derive knowledge from this data. And the most important part, I think, is the business process part. How will you integrate this model with the current business process of the organization? And how will you show that, yes, there are results? So all those Gini and other things that you have seen, there is power in the model, but unless you do this business process integration part really well and make it a habit to take decision using these models, all that effort is gone wasted. So I'm going to talk about next how the business processes, how that model was actually integrated in the business process and what kind of results were derived when it was done. So first of all, what do you do? So what have we got? We've got the probability. We have discussed this. What is the probability of X bucket customer to become 90 plus DPD in the next 3 months or 6 months? You've got the probability. Then you also have the overall principal outstanding of the customer. Basis that you kind of calculate the severity of a N of 1. Again, individual customer will have a severity score. Now you could use that severity score to kind of channel all your resources. So initially you try to this is a 3x3 just for simplicity, but for this particular case we built a 7x7 severity matrix, and each matrix has a specific action plan. Now what is action plan? Action plan is like whether just SMS or sending an email will give you the right results. You don't need to create additional cost of say sending an agent or even call center. So what many cases actually can just be rectified just using SMS. And when you do a phone call, sometimes customers can get irritated. So that's another thing, all these things you learn from data when a customer is getting irritated and what sort of things are happening. Which customer is to be routed to a call center, what kind of speech, what kind of message needs to be given, that is also told to the call center based on the 7x7 matrix that was prepared. Which case needs to be sent to an agent, what kind of action. Again, each action, each message was carefully designed. And when you design it, you also get more data. So when you design this experiment, you have seen, okay, this is what you have said, whether it has created the right kind of results or not. So overall, in this example, what we did is the overall roll forward rate reduced by 43%. That's almost 50%. Half the roll forward rate was reduced. One of the key things, and this is what I was talking about when we started, just looking at data, you can learn so much about the organization. And in this case, what we learned is that there were certain agents that were gaming the system. Now, gaming the system means that they knew that what kind of incentives are there for, say, 90 plus DPD case. What kind of incentives are there for 30 to 60? And all different incentives are aligned. Agents know their incentive. They say, okay, I'm not going to take a severe action today because after a month, the same case will come to me. I know this will get resolved and my incentives are going to be much higher. So that's the kind of gaming that was happening. And just by looking at the data, you can say, okay, this segment or this sector of agents are gaming the system. And that's another information which was waiting for us to look at. And when we looked at it, it was just glaring in towards us, and they said, okay, this is what is going on. Let's take this kind of action. And that was a key reason why, another key reason why roll forward rate was reduced. So all these interesting things are out there in your data. The idea is just to go and look for it. So that's essentially what the implementation, the entire plan was. Now the final part, how do you start? Now, one thing that we are saying from the beginning is that COVID-19 is possibly the moment for collection scoring and implementing, say, machine learning. But machine learning is just a means to the final place where you want to be, that is collection scorecards and improving the overall decision making in the organization. So that's what I think COVID has kind of created at this point, and purely for collection scoring. That's why it is so important. Credit scoring was always something that was getting a lot of attention, but collection, at least for next 2 years or 3 years, is going to be quite significantly important. How do you go about it? It's all good, hunky dory, that people are doing it, people are getting results, but I'm not there. And this is one thing which I've learned, that the idea is to start now. And why start now? Because you already have data. This is one misnomer that I see, I don't have data, but you do have it. It's possibly not structured properly. It's not possibly, and having worked with so many organizations across the globe, I've seen that it always started with the same notion. Everybody said, I don't think like okay, Amex can have data, American Express can have data, but we don't have. We are small players. We are very small players. So you say like, and then when they started, that's where the first generation scorecards were built, collection scorecard. On its own, like I mean, it was about 60 to 70% closer to Genie. Remember the Genie, that thing I talked about? It was very close to what Amex is producing, having seen all the different, like even the leading ones. So it was not that like you're so far behind. And trust me, that first generation, first step that you take kind of put you into the uh, continuous evolution. So that's what we are learning from COVID as well. Like I mean, nature doesn't wait for, okay, like I mean, when I have a perfect specimen, perfect human being, that's only then I'm going to make a human being. Nature is evolving every day. It's evolving for last billion years, and that's what we are seeing. We are a product of that evolution. Had nature said, okay, I'm not going to have like a small bacteria, there's no chance that human beings were created. And that's one thing which I see even in organization. Even Amex or all the leading organizations started the same way. So just a message for you, like if you want to do it yourself, like you want to kind of get your hands dirty, today is the day, because collection scorecards are going to be really important, and you already have data. So with that message, what I'll do is I'm kind of going to close this presentation.
Hi, Rupam. Thanks a lot, Rupam, for an insightful presentation.
Thanks.
Obviously, during the course of your presentation, we have been receiving a lot of questions. So I will have listed them down. First question that comes out is that, yes, data is available, but as you know that in several NBFCs, banks, startups, etc., a lot of this data is unstructured, in the sense not so there are two parts of unstructured. One is a lot of this data is covered by collection in Excel sheets forms. They are on emails, whether the settlements approvals are taken, attachments in Excel sheet form, which eventually doesn't go into any system. Not everybody has a collection system, and even if they have a collection system, not everything is there. And a lot of this structured. So question is that in such thing, how do we go about starting and building a collection scorecard?
No, very good question. When you'll start, you'll rarely have all the data available as such. But that's where I was talking about the data diagnostic, where you kind of go and look at where things are. Usually people underestimate, like that's my experience, what they have. And because they always compare themselves to the Googles of the world or the Facebooks of the world or the lot of companies that I have worked with, and these are like across the spectrum, have data. Possibly it's not sitting in the right format, right order. And that's where the data diagnostic comes into picture. Once you do that, rarely have I seen like where we could not build a scorecard, and something which is significantly improved the overall process. So that's something which I've never seen with any of the clients that I've worked with. So my understanding or feeling is that people often tend to underestimate what's going on in their organization.
Thanks, Rupam. So the following question comes is that what is the minimum data requirement that you should have? Because to build a scorecard, you need certain amount of BADs. What vintage of data to differentiate between an expert or a custom scorecard?
So this is again for application scorecard. Usually sample is often a challenge, because certain segments, certain profile, the data is always say sample size, like you need 1,000 loans, good and bad loans, so NPAs and non-NPAs loans. So that could be a challenge for a very small portfolio. Collection scorecard, the best part is that sample is really a challenge, because these transactions are happening so frequently, so dynamically. Sample size is building really fast. And even for like a small size organization, you'll always find sample to be good enough for collection scorecard. That's what my observation is so far. So if the organization is running for last 3-4 years, like even you'll always find good, and most organizations are running for longer than that.
The other question that has come about is, like in the application scoring, you have customer specific and product specific scorecards. Also in collection, do you suggest, based on your experience, that you may start with an overall, but is it better depending on the size of the organization, the customer? Should we have customer product specific collection scorecards?
Oh yeah. So again, this is like, let the science guide you. One of the common thing which we have seen in credit scorecard as an application scorecard. Initially, one thinks that two products are very different. However, data says no, they are just the same. So even in collection scorecard, same method or same principles hold true. Where if the collection scorecard, like let the data guide you what kind of segments, what kind of clusters need to be created to improve your Genie. At the end of the day, it's the predictive power that you care about. So data guides you. I mean, that's what my one should not go with any bias or any fixed notion, because a lot of fixed notions, data kind of throws it away, and like facts are there for everybody to see. Yeah.
Okay. And obviously a bank will have much more data, transaction data, asset and liability data.
Mm-hmm.
But we have several representations here who are from NBFCs,
Correct.
HFCs, MFIs.
Correct.
So two part of the question. One part of the question is that in a term loan scenario, other than a revolving facility and without asset liability, we are still good to build a collection scorecard. So that is part A of the question.
Mm-hmm.
And part B of the question is that there are certain customer segments like the affordable housing, or let's say the MFI, where third-party digital data is rare.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, with the existing data, can we build a scorecard? So two part of the question.
Okay, so just to answer your question, I don't know if you noticed the case study, that's from an NBFC. That's not from banks. Banks case study could be slightly more elaborated because they have data on the liabilities books as well. But within a NBFC, you have got a lot of data as well. HFC, same thing applies. So to answer your first question, what can NBFC do with this? Like that case study is a testimonial on its own. The second question that you asked is about
lack of digital data for MFI and affordable housing.
Correct. So digital data, honestly speaking, it's a journey. So that's where I was talking about that generation 1, the generation 2, generation 3. Lack of digital data is something that, honestly speaking, like 10 years ago when I was doing the same work, or 20 years, or like 18 years ago when I was doing the same work, it was data was much sparser than what it is today. So digital data is growing, and it's going to grow really fast. And that's where I think the notion that digital data is not there, it's possibly true today, but you will see dynamic changes in that particular aspect. I'm already seeing it. And it holds true for HFC, all the organizations.
The other question that has come about is that we have mostly spoken about collection scorecard. Obviously, I'm sure it is a wider definition. About the example about accounts which are marginally delinquent becoming more delinquent.
Mm-hmm.
What about scorecards building for recovery where accounts are NPA and we are going to predict that they are going to come back? So any thoughts on that?
Correct. So there are recovery scorecards, and recovery scorecards are also equally powerful as collection scorecards. Recovery scorecard, even for HFC, like one of the things that you talked about, it also tells you what kind of recoveries, and that's what kind of actions to take to ensure higher recovery. So learning from data kind of throws all these things at the analyst. So recovery scorecards are also equally powerful, and they are process wise, if you see, there are some similarities between collection and recovery scorecard. There are multiple differences as well, but yes, there are ways to build recovery scorecards as well.
And considering that the recovery LGD is different for a secured and an unsecured, so you would suggest that we build separately, let's say for a mortgage versus a personal loan?
Yes. So PD might be similar. So that's where I say, there are two aspects to any model. There's probability of default or probability to roll forward. And second one is loss given default. So LGD is something that is a product specific. secured, unsecured, of course, all those things will. But PD, you will find that a customer, whether like, I mean, there are similarities between products, and that's where I was saying, let the data guide you rather than going in with some fixed notions.
Okay. So as you're aware that unlike in the past, the first time in the history, we are having a long restructuring officially endorsed by the regulator, 3 months, then plus 3 months. How do you see the restructuring actually having an impact on the scorecards, collection scorecards?
Correct. So all this will have an impact. Not just restructuring, but also not all the loans will get restructured.
Moratorium as well.
Correct. So moratorium is a lack of information that the moratorium has created. Restructuring will also create and that's where this dynamic nature of scorecard that I was talking about, collection scorecard, are so important, because it's dynamic. It's something that learns from what has happened and kind of incorporate it in what it is going to predict. So it's not that today if you run a collection scorecard, it might give a different value. If you run the same scorecard, like say 1 year down the line, you'll get a different value, because times has changed, video has changed, as I was telling you, dynamicity has changed, and it will incorporate all these changes that we are seeing in terms of health, when we say COVID-19, in terms of economy, in terms of job losses, whatever other factors that are there. It will keep absorbing it, keep learning, just like human beings, we learn from what's happening around our surrounding. That's the power of behavioral scorecard. It learns from its surrounding and it keeps improving itself.
Thanks, Rupam. So one of the important questions that has come, that, perhaps because it is unprecedented, there will be a limited scope of backtesting in terms of these scorecards. So in such a scenario that we are faced today, how do we look at the robustness of the collection scorecard?
So backtesting will be a challenge, I agree. And that will be a bigger challenge, I think, in terms of credit scoring. Because credit scoring has the way the methodology is set, backtesting will create a larger. So that's where I say, like, credit scoring for a 1 year, next 1 year, there will not be too much effort in direction of credit scoring. There will be still, people will still invest in it, but it's not going to be, because you will get a lot of new information in next 3 to 4 quarters, immediately after moratorium. And scoring model, like a static image, wants to incorporate that static information. So that's where like maybe after 9 months down the line, you will have again a rush of credit scorecard, because you're going to create so much information in next 9 months. Good, bad, like, we know it's not going to be good, but that everything is information and everything is to learn from. And models usually learn better from bad information or adverse scenario than the good scenarios, like human beings do. So that analogy holds for model as well. What I think is that collection scoring, unlike credit scoring, will not have so much of a backtesting problem. And that why it is so, because we need to constantly like keep a check on it, and constantly it will learn from the new information and throw in new results. So collection scoring, and because of all these nonlinear patterns, and as well as data that is available, which is coming every say month or week or second, like for the way you are analyzing things, it will enrich. It has a lesser problem of what you see in credit scoring. So I think, like, overall and globally, this is the pattern which I'm seeing. All the banks and organizations are investing a lot on operational models, including fraud models, collection models, recovery models, as you talked about. And the reason is that these models are going to be very important in the next not just 9 months, I would assume for next 2 years.
The other thought was that you spoke a lot about using of machine learning in this kind of behavioral models compared to a logic regression model in an application scoring. So is there any examples in machine learning how it actually works to enhance the scorecards?
How machine learning works against?
Yeah, enhancing the scorecard, yeah.
other than the logistic regression?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So logistic regression, one thing is that is very significant in the statistical model is like I'm getting a little bit technical, but just to explain, there's a problem of multicollinearity, and I'll explain what multicollinearity means. So let's say age of a person and their experience. I'm talking about salaried customer is two variables that are two different variables, but they have a very high correlation with each other. So age of a person and their uh, experience in an industry. Now, when logistic regression or a traditional regression model, essentially statistical model, when it looks at this multi-collinear data that is two variables x1 and x2, as I showed in the previous slide, if age and experience is there, they kind of contradict each other and they don't agree with each other, and that's where your model doesn't work so well, because the beta coefficient, like the coefficient that is, or the factor that is assigned to these variables, kind of get confused in a nutshell. Now, machine learning model, however, is much more potent in terms of handling these intrinsic, like very complicated patterns in the predictor variables. So age and experience and various other variables. In addition to that, for collection scoring, as I was telling you, there are so many behavioral patterns. Now, these behavioral patterns collectively, just permutation combination, will give you close to 1,000 variables. So you are throwing in 1,000 variables or even more to your model to learn from. And then the model will kind of go through all of them and say, okay, like, I mean, how to put them all together. If you do the same process with logistic regression, 1,000 variables, and with all these multicollinearity, it will just fail. It will not work at all. So that's why credit scoring is a good case for there. Or it will work, but it will take a lot of effort to build that model. Like, it will be ages before you will be able to build that model, a good model. Machine learning, however, appreciate all these noisy things in the data. It's kind of tailor-made to handle this kind of data. And that's where the overall predictive power goes up, and overall confidence in the model also goes up. So it's machine learning, essentially, if you see, is tailor-made for large volume of data. Complexity in the data is high, multicollinearity and all these features, and still it can handle it and give you the right kind of probability.
Thanks a lot, Rupam. So the other thing that is like there are several people on the call today may not have the full statistical piece. So just to give them a sense, because you have referred to Gini and a percentage. So what would actually a Gini signify, and what is a good Gini that they should look at while on the model development and a phase, initial phase, and then as the model improves?
Correct. So there is no hard and fast definition. The maximum Gini can be 100 or 1. So as a, like, I'll just go back to that slide if just to give you a sense. This is the number that you're talking about. So the maximum Gini, and that's like God. If you say this is what is going to happen, this is what happened. If you this is not going to happen, this is not happen. So if you put somebody like a God-like figure here, then you'll get a Gini of 100. A line, something which is just a square line like this. So anything that, any prediction that the God is making, of course, is going to come true. But nobody is God. So that's where, like, you will get Gini something like this. Now, what does this mean? A good Gini for a fraud model. People will say even a Gini of 40, 42, 45 is a good Gini for a fraud model. Credit card fraud model, like, I mean, even sometimes like other fraud models, you take even lesser Gini. For a credit scorecard model, you typically say if you get a Gini of 60, it's a brilliant model. And as I was telling you, collection models usually outbeat credit scoring model, because so credit scoring model, like, I mean, application scoring, like a good range to get is like anything between, say, 50 to 60, 65, that range. You can get slightly higher as well, but with more information. But typically, this is what you observe, even for the best of the organizations. For collection scoring, because you're bringing in these behavioral patterns, your Gini tends to increase. And that's what was observed in this case study as well. Yeah.
Okay. So we are, I think, coming to the close. Thanks for your time. Thanks for taking us through for this session.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I wish everyone the very best. Stay safe.